These are the test rings from the last lustre firing. There are 3 pigments involved. All those are with the same pigment. These are the same pigment as those. We start taking out rings after the 4th reduction. Before that, probably nothing much has happened. And the first ring came out after the 4th reduction. That's after about 20 minutes, something like that. And as you'll see, it's almost white, but I can see there's just a slight stain of colour, a pinkish yellow. Then this one comes out after the next reduction. Sometimes we take out more than one, and you can see the gradation of colour developing in these in the course of the reduction. Now these are a pigment which works best in the hot places. So, and the rings are kept further down in the kiln. So we know that if anything is developing on these, something is happening in the upper parts of the kiln. But to prevent us going too far, and you can go too far, it's very tempting, you see, to try to make beautiful rings. And you have to remember, the rings are only there to enable you to make beautiful pots. So we've got 2 other pigments which are more sensitive. This is a copper-silver blend. This is the first ring, second ring, third, fourth. And you see this is developed very much more brilliantly. So that's actually rather encouraging for us, and it helps us not to go on to make a beautiful red, which in fact this would do if you took it higher. This is simply a third kind of pigment, a more coppery one, which we put in just for the interest of it. So these rings are telling us, as the reductions develop in the course of the firing, telling us what is going on inside the kiln, and they're absolutely crucial. Okay, Christian, take it away again. Thank you, that's fine. Still, what is it now, Andrew?
6:58.
Good, good, good.
Excellent.
Right.
2 rings are now 3.
3 out. One of each. Right.
60 and
Okay.
6:40.
This is number 11, the pinky one.
Oh, not bad.
Developed more than it often does. But they're telling us that something's happening, which is quite all right.
It's got a lock in.
And can you see what the new parameter is? Those are the marks from the previous one.
Yes, there's a
There's a
higher
ghost.
difference on the back.
I've got the interlobe red design and the silver design. It's red.
I think that's actually a very pleasing effect.
It's rather
Yes,
weird,
yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
Quite fascinating.
Here's the bowl that you saw being decorated in an earlier stage, and you also saw it being put in the kiln. Now, it was in the upper part of the kiln because this is meant to go a strong red colour, and where the air changes in the upper part of the kiln, as I described during the packing, the reds develop best. Silvery colours go below. If we put a silvery colour up here, the clay, which is what you're seeing now, the ochre stuff, would have stuck into the glaze. Now this is it's one of my stiffer glazes, and it will take the hot parts of the kiln, so it's particularly suitable for red. Now to rub it off, I'm taking one of these little cloths, and I've got two mixtures of powder which are lightly abrasive. In this case I'm going to use grog, which is a crushed fire clay, very finely sieved, and hopefully it won't scratch the lustre. For silver pieces, where the lustre is more easily scratched, we usually use whiting, which is very fine, very soft, but it doesn't actually rub off the ochre quite so easily, so we have to do more elbow work. Now, here we go. Here we go. What should we try first? The middle. There we are. I'm rubbing off the ochre, and the red lustre you're seeing is the product of copper carbonate and tin oxide blended with red ochre, and the ochre is a sort of carrier. It dilutes the metal compounds, but it also protects them during the firing against volatilization. It doesn't actually play a major part in the development of colour. It's really more a carrier. Though some people say, and I think there's a lot in this, that ferric oxide, which is in the ochre, helps to prevent reoxidation during the lustre firing. That may be true, but it is also possible to apply lustre without red ochre, simply using kaolin instead, which of course contains no iron. So this is the sort of subtle point that people can discuss ad infinitum without actually spoiling it by coming into a conclusion. Here we go on the back. You quite often find a slight difference of lustre character between the front and the back, for the obvious reason that as the draft blows over it, the front in this case is more exposed and the back slightly more sheltered, so that and in this case I think the back is slightly less lustre, slightly less dark colour than the inside. We don't see it in this case because it's a fairly small pot, but in some cases with large bowls you will get actually a difference of colour from one side to the other, simply because the draft may have been slightly hotter at one edge than the other. But on a small piece like this, that doesn't arise. Here are the marks underneath. It's very important for us to mark the underside with the glaze and the pigments, because that determines where it goes in the kiln. If you have a pot which somebody has forgotten to mark, and I must say sometimes I forget myself, you are in two minds whether it should be in the top part of the kiln or in the middle or the bottom. And the likelihood of making a mistake is quite considerable. Now, this little bowl is painted in a pigment which is based, it's a laboratory version of a lustre pigment described in the treatise of Abul Qasim of Kashan, which I think was written about 1301. It's extremely unusual to find any pigment recipes from the past. And nobody, of course, can possibly make this pigment up in exactly the way Abul Qasim describes, because he's talking about natural materials where you find such and such a thing, whereas we think in terms of analytical chemistry. However, it was possible to make an equivalent of his mixture. And I've tried it once or twice before. It fires best in the lower, cooler parts of my kiln, which is why it was low down, fairly low down in the middle front. Now let's give it a rub. It should be a sort of golden colour, and so far as I can see, it is, yes, it has got some quite nice goldy bits in it. Let's go on. It's quite nice. This is one of the best double custom ones I've had, actually. It so much depends on getting it in exactly the right place in the kiln. I've had it too high up where everything stuck right into the glaze. I've had it too low down where it just made a very faint fuzz, stain colour but no lustre. This one has actually quite definitely got a lustre golden sheen on it. This is really nice to see, particularly for our present interest in making a connection between current practice and lustre as made in the past. Quite pretty, quite pretty. I'll hold it up. Whether you will actually be able to pick up any reflection, I'm not sure. It's very gentle, but it's there.